I remember race relations in Detroit in the late 60s. We had a race riot in 1967. I remember that very clearly, driving down streets of my town where I grew up and seeing National Guard and tanks and whole blocks smoldering. That was more frightening than the Cuban Missile Crisis, or as some would have us believe, you know, we grew up in the 50s going to bed every night afraid the nuclear bomb would drop. I never went to bed afraid about the nuclear bomb. But that experience was tragic and scary. I think the reason, two reasons in my own case, why sort of the civil rights passes by. And I remember arguing about this with a very good friend who was very involved in the civil rights movement. And she was also very, very left-wing, a very close friend of mine in high school. And I think that the feeling was, or the sense, informed and not so informed, was that the civil rights movement in principle was correct. That if you asked a conservative what is the most important thing, it's individual freedom. And if you believe in that, and you believe in the uniqueness of the human being, you cannot in any way support any kind of racial discrimination. It's anathema to, in my view, to a belief of conservatism, particularly traditionalists, that, you know, we're children of God and each unique and have that divine spark within us. And so you can't categorize or stereotype people on the basis of their makeup or their genes, for heaven's sakes. So that in principle is right. But the fact is that there was a lot of involvement in the movement by people whose primary objective, we felt, given their associations, was to use the movement to weaken, to undermine, to challenge, to cripple the authority of our government and our constitutional system. Now, that was wrong, I'm sure, and conservatives not see beyond that, to see that, yes, there were people in the movement that were manipulative, that were outsiders, that were, if you will, subversives. And there's no question that there was a lot of subversive activity directed by, communist apparatus that was involved in the civil rights movement. But that should not have blinded us to the merits and the importance of this struggle. And that was wrong. But I think there's another aspect to it, and that is, from our perspective, coming alive basically as a movement. Conservatism was a non-entity. Even intellectually, it was dismissed. Liberalism was so pervasive a dogma throughout all of the institutions of our society. The media, the academic, academy, government. It wasn't at the grassroots, but at the national level. The whole focus was towards a collectivist, big government. You got big problems, you need big government to solve them. So we had two battles that we were fighting ourselves. One, to get a hearing, because the media ignored us, not only ignored us as young people, as activists, but it ignored us intellectually. Until the National Review came about, in ISI and Human Events and a few others, there was no intellectual articulation of the philosophy. Then when we came along as young people, as activists, we first had to work to try and get the Republican Party back on track, which had basically sort of capitulated to the status quo. There was Democrats are here to stay, they're the majority, we got to be Me Too. We didn't buy that. We also said that it was important to state principle. You know, whether you win or not, stating the principle, being right, is what's important. And ultimately, we'll win. So the energies, the focus was more on getting our message out, articulating, and defining the distinctions inherent between a Democrat, liberal, collectivist philosophy and a conservative, small Republican, because the Republican Party then was dominated by the moderate liberal wing, Eastern wing. Nelson Rockefeller, that was what the '64 convention was all about, was challenging that and taking having conservatives who are at the grassroots in place in the leadership of the party. And Goldwater was our standard bearer.